Snowflakes drifted gently down, each one unique, as if even the sky above felt compelled to make the season brighter. For the people milling through the town square, bundled in coats and scarves, holiday spirit was alive and radiant. The square bustled with shoppers, twinkling lights, and the rich sense of roasted chestnuts and sweet pastries. But for Ellie and Max, the glow and warmth belonged to another world. From a shadowy corner, Ellie observed the happy faces passing by. She was only 13, but her gaze held the wisdom of someone much older. Her younger brother Max, with his wide, curious eyes, clutched her hand tightly. The town square had once been familiar to them, but now, as they huddled to stay warm, it felt like a distant memory. Max looked up at the towering Christmas tree in the center of the square, the colored lights reflecting in his eyes. He tugged on Ellie's coat sleeve. "Do you think we'll have Christmas this year?" Ellie squeezed his hand. She wanted to reassure him, but words fell hollow. "Maybe, Max. We can make it a special day, no matter what." She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to take away his hope. Max had a way of keeping her grounded, his innocent dreams a reminder of better times. They found a quiet corner where they could rest, hidden from view. With only a thin blanket between them and the cold ground, Ellie wrapped her arms around Max. As he drifted to sleep, she closed her eyes, feeling the ache of longing that cut deeper than the chill in her bones. But despite everything, she resolved that they would find some joy this Christmas, even if it was only in a memory. Ellie stirred awake to the sound of laughter nearby. The square had started to empty as people made their way home, and in the dimming light, something caught her eye. Not far from where they had settled, half hidden behind a stone bench, was a Christmas tree. It wasn't large or particularly full, but it had a few glittering ornaments and a string of lights wrapped around it. "Look, Ellie, a Christmas tree." Max's eyes lit up, his voice filled with excitement. "Maybe it's for us." Ellie knew better, but she couldn't bear to dim Max's joy. Together, they approached the tree, glancing around to make sure no one was coming back for it. The tree was small enough for them to carry, and the sight of it made her heart ache with longing. "Do you think we could keep it?" Max asked softly. He looked up at her, hope and wonder in his eyes. She hesitated, the weight of responsibility pressing on her. They barely had anything, but this tree, with its faintly glowing lights, seemed to bridge the gap between their world and the one filled with warmth and laughter. "Maybe, just for tonight." Together, they lifted the little tree, carrying it carefully. With each step, Ellie felt a strange warmth creeping in, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. But as they made their way through the quiet streets, Max suddenly stopped. "Ellie," he whispered, "can we give it to the other kids? The ones at the orphanage?" She paused, her heart torn. The idea of keeping the tree felt so comforting, yet Max's suggestion stirred something deeper. She looked into his eyes, seeing the kindness that never seemed to waver, even when he had every reason to be selfish. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, Max, let's take it to them." With renewed purpose, they continued on their journey. The snow continued to fall around them, but for the first time in a long time, Ellie felt like they were heading somewhere that mattered. The snow began to fall heavier, blanketing the streets and muffling the usual city sounds. Ellie and Max trudged along with their small Christmas tree between them, each step crunching softly beneath their feet. The streets were quieter now, as people had retreated to the warmth of their homes, leaving Ellie and Max alone with their decision. Ellie's thoughts churned as she looked at the tree's small, flickering lights. There was something about it, something magical that softened the harshness of winter. A part of her wanted to take it to their shelter, to feel a little of the holiday spirit that seemed to have passed them by. She imagined the two of them, sitting together, with a warm glow from the tree lighting up the small space. As they walked, Ellie's desire to keep the tree for themselves grew. Her memories of past Christmases, when they'd had a family and warmth, flooded back, tempting her to hold onto the tree for a bit longer. She glanced down at Max, whose small hands gripped the base of the tree tightly. His eyes were focused, a quiet determination there that she recognized all too well. Ellie. Max broke the silence, looking up at her. Do you think the kids at the orphanage will like it? Ellie forced a smile. Yeah, I think they'll like it, Max. But her heart was heavy with the conflict. She wanted to make this a memorable night for Max, to hold onto a piece of the holiday joy they'd once known. The thought of sharing the tree with strangers felt like giving away the last bit of happiness they had. Yet, as they walked, Max's enthusiasm and innocence kept pulling her back. His joy wasn't just for them. It was a gift he wanted to give to others. Ellie sighed, knowing what she had to do. She squeezed Max's shoulder. You're right, Max. They'll love it. And it'll be even better when we see them happy, right? Max's smile brightened, and Ellie felt a weight lift, replaced by a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in a long time: pride. Ellie and Max moved quietly through the streets, their breath visible in the crisp air as they carried the tree together. The night was silent, the only sound coming from their footsteps and the occasional rustling of branches weighed down by snow. The town was mostly asleep, lights in windows dimming as people settled in for the night. As they neared the edge of the town square, an older woman noticed them struggling with the tree and stopped. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. Are you two all right, dears? She asked, her gaze softening as she noticed the tree. Ellie hesitated, unsure if she should explain. We're taking it somewhere, she said, choosing her words carefully. The woman looked at them thoughtfully and then nodded, a small smile touching her lips. That's a lovely thing you're doing, she said gently, handing Ellie a knitted scarf. For the journey, she added, then walked away before Ellie could thank her. Ellie wrapped the scarf around Max, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. The simple act of kindness steadied her resolve, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose as they continued through the snow. However, the journey wasn't easy. Snow had begun to gather on the roads, and the weight of the tree was becoming more cumbersome. At one point, a police officer noticed them and walked over, his flashlight casting long shadows across the snow. Hey, kids, he called, his voice authoritative yet not unkind. What are you doing out here so late? Max gripped the tree tightly, glancing up at Ellie with a worried look. Ellie straightened, meeting the officer's gaze with as much calm as she could muster. We're just delivering a Christmas gift, she said, her voice steady. The officer looked at them both, taking in their worn clothes and the determined look on Ellie's face. After a moment, he nodded. All right, but be careful. And don't stay out too late, he said, stepping back. They continued on, each encounter making Ellie feel a little more committed to their plan. The snow seemed endless, but the thought of bringing joy to the other children gave her strength. Finally, after what felt like an endless trek, they reached the orphanage. The building was tall and solemn, its windows dark. Ellie felt a shiver run through her, not from the cold, but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. She looked at Max, who gave her a determined nod, and together they lifted the tree one last time, carrying it up to the door. Ellie hesitated before knocking on the heavy wooden door of the orphanage. The building loomed quietly against the snowy landscape, its towering windows dark except for a faint glow from within. Beside her, Max waited patiently, clutching the base of a small tree they had carried all this way. With a deep breath, Ellie knocked. Moments passed, and she was about to knock again when the door creaked open. A tall, gentle-looking man stood there, his gaze curious as he took in the sight of Ellie, Max, and their small tree. Yes. Can I help you? He asked, his voice warm but cautious. Ellie swallowed, glancing at Max before answering. We brought this for the children, she said, nodding toward the tree. For a moment, the man looked surprised, but then a smile crept onto his face. Why, that's very kind of you, he said, stepping back and inviting them inside. Come in, come in. You both look frozen. The warmth of the orphanage hit them as soon as they entered. A faint scent of pine and baking lingered in the air, and Ellie felt her muscles relax. Max's eyes widened as he took in the room around them, filled with simple decorations, a few handmade ornaments, and chairs arranged around a fireplace crackling with warmth. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Harris, helped them set up the tree in a corner of the main room, where the other children would soon gather. Ellie noticed Max smiling as he watched Mr. Harris, his expression one of awe. She realized how rare it was for them to be welcomed so warmly. As they finished arranging the tree, Mr. Harris turned to Ellie. "Would you two like to stay for a while? We're having a little gathering tonight. Just the children and staff here," he said, his eyes kind. Ellie glanced at Max, who looked up at her with hopeful eyes. She hesitated, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. But after a moment, she nodded. Yes, that would be nice. The evening passed in a blur of laughter and soft voices. The children at the orphanage welcomed them eagerly, gathering around the tree and adding decorations they had made themselves. Max was instantly pulled into their excitement, his face lighting up as he shared in their joy. Ellie, watching him from the edge of the room, felt a warmth she hadn't known in a long time. The lights on the small tree flickered softly as the children gathered around it, their faces illuminated with wonder. Ellie and Max sat nearby, watching as the other children carefully hung handmade paper stars and ribbons, their laughter and chatter filling the room. Max joined them eagerly, his laughter mingling with theirs as he helped hang ornaments. Ellie's gaze drifted over the children, taking in their various faces, each with a unique story and a look of quiet resilience. She could see a reflection of herself and Max in some of them, children who had known hardship but still held onto a spark of hope. Mr. Harris returned with a tray of hot cocoa, handing each child a mug. When he gave Ellie and Max their own cups, he paused, studying Ellie with a gentle smile. "Thank you for bringing the tree. It means a lot to the kids." Ellie took a sip of her cocoa, the warmth spreading through her. "They deserve a Christmas too," she replied softly, glancing around the room. Mr. Harris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "They do. But kindness like yours, it's not something they see every day." His words struck a chord in Ellie, and she felt a pang of emotion, recognizing how rare this kindness was in their own lives. As the night continued, the children began to share stories, their voices blending into a comforting hum. Max sat next to a girl about his age, telling her about his favorite memories of their parents, the only family he'd ever known. Ellie listened from across the room, her heart heavy with a mixture of pride and sadness. She hadn't wanted to relive those memories, but seeing Max share them made her realize they were still part of him. As the children prepared to say goodnight, Mr. Harris approached Ellie. "If you two would like, you're welcome to stay here tonight," he offered, his tone inviting yet respectful of her decision. Ellie felt her heart ache at the kindness in his words. She glanced at Max, who was already nodding, his eyes filled with excitement. For him, the thought of a warm bed and a roof over their heads, even for one night, was like a dream come true. Ellie hesitated, struggling to balance her pride and the practical reality of their situation. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." As they settled into their borrowed beds that night, Ellie lay awake for a while, listening to the sounds of the other children breathing softly in the quiet room. The weight of their journey, the kindness they'd experienced, and the warmth surrounding them all wrapped around her, offering a fragile sense of comfort. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in the goodness of others. Morning light crept through the orphanage windows, casting a soft glow on the small Christmas tree in the corner. Ellie stirred, waking slowly as she took in the unfamiliar but comforting surroundings. Beside her, Max was still sound asleep, curled up under a thick blanket. It was the first truly warm night they had shared in a long time. As she sat up, Ellie's gaze settled on the tree. The children had left their handmade decorations on it, transforming the tree into a colorful and heartfelt display of holiday spirit. A small star made from yellowed paper, a string of popcorn, a few paper snowflakes, Each ornament was a reminder of the children's resilience and creativity. Ellie rose quietly, moving closer to the tree. She touched one of the ornaments, a small angel made of scrap fabric, and felt a pang of emotion. Somehow, they had managed to bring light and joy into a place that had so little of both. For the first time, she felt as if they had done something truly meaningful. Moments later, the other children began to wake, filling the room with soft murmurs and sleepy yawns. Max sat up, rubbing his eyes, before his gaze landed on Ellie. His face broke into a smile, and he rushed over to join her by the tree. The children gathered around them, admiring the decorations they had made the night before. The simple act of gathering to decorate had created a powerful bond among them. Max looked up at Ellie with a grin, his eyes filled with the unspoken pride of knowing they had brought this joy to others. As the morning went on, Mr. Harris joined them, his usual kind smile brightened by the sight of the children around the tree. He suggested that they sing Christmas carols, a tradition that had faded over the years but felt right to revive in that moment. With voices timid at first, then growing stronger, the children sang together, their voices filling the orphanage with warmth. The soft, uneven tones carried a purity that resonated deeply within Ellie. This was more than a gathering around a tree. It was a gift of light to each child in that room. By afternoon, the orphanage was buzzing with excitement. News of the little tree and the siblings who had brought it had spread among the staff and volunteers, drawing a few more people to join the celebration. One by one, they arrived with small gifts for the children: warm socks, mittens, handmade cards, and a few toys. Each item was wrapped with care, and the children's faces lit up with every new arrival. Ellie was astonished by the transformation happening before her eyes. The orphanage, usually quiet and somber, had become a place of joy and laughter. She watched Max helping a younger boy unwrap a small, stuffed animal, his own happiness shining as brightly as the child's. Despite their own struggles, he had found joy in giving. Mr. Harris approached Ellie, who stood watching from a corner. "Your kindness has sparked something wonderful here," he said, his voice warm. "This isn't the Christmas we'd planned, but it might be one of the most meaningful." Ellie felt her face flush, a mixture of pride and humility. She hadn't expected to be at the center of something so impactful, especially when they had so little to give. Yet here she was, witnessing the true spirit of Christmas unfold around her. As the evening drew near, the orphanage prepared a modest Christmas feast for the children. The tables were lined with dishes, simple, homemade foods that filled the room with inviting aromas. Ellie and Max were invited to join, and as they sat down, Ellie felt a sense of gratitude she hadn't felt in years. The warmth of the meal, the laughter of the children, and the knowledge that they had helped make this happen overwhelmed her. The children's stories began to emerge over dinner. Some of them spoke of their dreams, their memories of family, and their hopes for the future. Listening to them, Ellie felt an ache of familiarity. She realized that they were all connected, not just by circumstance, but by the shared resilience to find joy in small moments. As the evening went on, Mr. Harris offered a toast. "To Ellie and Max," he said, raising his glass, "for reminding us of the kindness and love that Christmas is all about." The children raised their glasses of apple cider, echoing Mr. Harris's words with cheers. Ellie and Max exchanged a glance, each feeling the depth of what they had brought to this place, not just through the tree, but through the spirit of selflessness and compassion. As the festivities wound down, Ellie found herself reflecting on the day. She felt a warmth beyond what the orphanage walls could provide, a warmth that came from knowing they had made a difference. For the first time since losing her family, she felt part of something larger than herself, connected to a community and to the spirit of Christmas. As the celebrations settled into the evening, Ellie found herself a quiet spot near the window. Outside, snow blanketed the town, the streets now silent under a peaceful sky filled with stars. She could hear the faint sound of laughter behind her as the children played, their joy filling the orphanage with life. Her thoughts drifted to Christmases past, the ones spent with her parents, filled with warmth, music, and the smell of fresh pine. She remembered her mother's laugh, her father's warm hugs, and the way they would sit together by the fireplace, sharing stories and dreams. Those memories felt like treasures locked away, glimpses of a life that seemed distant yet vivid. A gentle tap on her shoulder brought her back to the present. Max stood beside her, his face soft with understanding. He sensed her sadness, even without words. "I miss them too," he whispered, his eyes reflecting the same memories. They stood together in silence, sharing the bittersweetness of those memories. Ellie wrapped her arm around him, drawing comfort from the bond that remained despite everything they had lost. As the evening wore on, Mr. Harris approached them, holding a small, wrapped gift. "Ellie, Max," he said warmly, "we have something for you. It's not much, but it's a little piece of Christmas we wanted you to have." Ellie unwrapped the gift carefully, her hands shaking slightly. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden ornament shaped like a star. It was simple, yet beautiful, and it symbolized something she hadn't realized she'd been longing for, a sense of belonging. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible over the lump in her throat. She looked at Max, who held the star reverently, his eyes bright with gratitude. They hung the ornament on the small tree, and as it caught the light, Ellie felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that this was the beginning of something new. It wouldn't erase the past or bring back what they had lost, but it was a step toward healing, a reminder that hope could still exist even in the darkest times. That night, as the orphanage grew quiet, Ellie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Despite the joy they had experienced, she felt a lingering weight, a sense of sadness she couldn't quite shake. The memories of her family had stirred something deep within her, and now, lying in the unfamiliar warmth of the orphanage, she felt torn between the past and the uncertain future. Max was asleep beside her, his face relaxed in peaceful slumber. She brushed a hand through his hair, comforted by his presence, yet burdened by her responsibility toward him. She knew he deserved more than a transient Christmas celebration. He deserved stability, security, a home. But she was just a child herself, lost and unsure of where they truly belonged. As the night grew colder, doubt crept in. The fear of rejection, the possibility that they wouldn't be able to stay here, haunted her. She worried about the future, about what would happen once the holiday was over. These thoughts swirled in her mind, pulling her deeper into a place of vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to visit in a long time. A sudden noise in the hallway snapped her out of her thoughts. She rose quietly, slipping out of the room to investigate. She found Mr. Harris, who had been checking on the children, and he noticed the worry etched on her face. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently, sensing her turmoil. Ellie hesitated, then nodded. "It's hard to feel like we belong anywhere." Mr. Harris's gaze softened, understanding the depth of her fear. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Belonging doesn't always happen overnight, Ellie. But you're part of this place now, even if it's just for a little while. And sometimes, that's all we need, a little warmth to remind us that we're not alone." She took in his words, letting them settle over her. They were comforting, but the sense of uncertainty remained. Ellie returned to her room, lying down beside Max once more. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as if trying to protect him from the fears that haunted her. As dawn approached, Ellie found herself drifting into a restless sleep. She knew that she had to stay strong, for Max's sake and her own. She didn't have all the answers, but she held on to the small hope that this place, these people, might be the beginning of a future she hadn't dared to dream of before. And as the first light of morning touched the window, she resolved to face whatever came next with the courage she had found through every hardship, determined to keep moving forward. Morning dawned crisp and bright, with sunlight streaming through the orphanage windows, casting a soft glow over the small Christmas tree. The festive atmosphere from the night before lingered, filling the orphanage with an unspoken warmth. Ellie and Max awoke to the sounds of children laughing and talking in the hallway, their voices light and cheerful. As they joined the others for breakfast, Ellie noticed that word had spread throughout the town about the tree they had brought and the impromptu celebration that had unfolded. Villagers had been touched by the siblings' gesture and had decided to contribute to the orphanage, bringing small gifts and supplies. That morning, townsfolk trickled in, each bearing a small offering: food, toys, clothing, and other essentials for the children. Ellie watched in amazement as people, one by one, handed their gifts to Mr. Harris and the children. She felt a mixture of pride and gratitude, realizing that her and Max's simple act of kindness had sparked something much larger than they could have imagined. It was as if their small flame had ignited a bonfire of generosity within the community. One older woman approached Ellie, placing a warm coat around her shoulders. "This is for you, dear," she said, patting her hand. "Thank you for reminding us of the true spirit of Christmas." Ellie's cheeks flushed as she murmured her thanks. She glanced at Max, who was surrounded by a group of younger children, helping them unwrap their gifts with a wide smile. He looked over at her, his face beaming with pride. She felt a warmth within her that was deeper than anything she had felt before. It was a shared warmth, a connection with the people around her, and she realized that kindness had a way of multiplying, spreading like rays of light through even the darkest places. Throughout the morning, the children, staff, and townsfolk continued to share stories, laughter, and small acts of generosity. It was a scene Ellie had once only dreamed of: community, acceptance, and the feeling of being truly part of something. She looked around, letting herself absorb every moment, knowing that this memory would stay with her forever. As the day wore on, the visitors slowly began to leave, and the orphanage returned to its usual quiet hum. Ellie and Max found themselves sitting by the tree, taking in the remnants of the celebration: the scattered bits of wrapping paper, the cheerful decorations, and the faint scent of pine filling the room. They felt a contentment neither of them had known before. Mr. Harris approached them, his expression thoughtful. "Ellie, Max," he began gently, "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Ellie straightened, sensing the gravity of his words. Mr. Harris took a seat beside them, his gaze kind yet serious. "We've spoken among the staff, and we all agree that you two have brought something truly special here. The children, the staff, and even the community have felt it." Ellie's heart began to pound, unsure of where this was going. She looked at Max, who was watching Mr. Harris with wide, hopeful eyes. "We would like to offer you both a place here," Mr. Harris continued. "It's not much, but we can provide you with a warm bed, meals, and a chance to go to school. You'd be part of our family here." For a moment, Ellie was speechless, her mind racing. A part of her had yearned for stability, a place where she and Max could feel safe. But she had also built walls around herself, preparing for a life where they would only have each other, with no guarantees of anything else. Max tugged on her hand, his eyes bright with hope. "Ellie, we could stay here. We could have a real home." Ellie looked down at him, her heart aching with emotion. She thought of all the nights they had spent huddled in the cold, of all the days they had wandered the streets with nowhere to go. And now, here they were, being offered a chance at a life she had barely allowed herself to dream of. She met Mr. Harris's gaze, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you sure? We wouldn't be a burden?" Mr. Harris shook his head, his smile reassuring. "No, Ellie, you both belong here, and it would be our privilege to have you with us." A tear slipped down Ellie's cheek as she nodded, unable to hold back the wave of relief and gratitude washing over her. She looked at Max, who was already hugging Mr. Harris, his face filled with joy. Ellie joined them, feeling a warmth surround her, a feeling of home that she had thought was lost forever. For the rest of the day, Ellie and Max explored the orphanage as if seeing it for the first time, knowing that this was now their home. They met with the other children, shared stories, and felt a sense of connection they hadn't known in years. That evening, as they settled into their beds, Ellie held Max close, whispering words of reassurance. "Tomorrow," she told him, "we'll start a new chapter. We'll learn, we'll grow, and we'll be safe." This is our home now." Max nodded, his eyes shining with excitement. As he drifted off to sleep, Ellie lay awake for a moment, feeling the weight of their journey finally lift. They had found a place where they belonged, a place filled with warmth, kindness, and love. And as she closed her eyes, she knew that they were no longer alone in the world. The days following Christmas were filled with a quiet joy that settled over the orphanage like a warm blanket. Snow continued to fall, covering the town in a soft, white layer, making the world feel fresh and new. The children of the orphanage, including Ellie and Max, spent the days exploring, playing in the snow, and helping Mr. Harris and the staff prepare for the new year. Ellie found herself adjusting to their new life with surprising ease. Each day brought new routines and responsibilities, but she relished them. She felt a sense of purpose and safety that had been missing for so long. The staff treated her and Max as if they had always belonged, and slowly, she let herself believe that maybe they truly did. New Year's Eve arrived with a sense of anticipation in the air. Mr. Harris had arranged a small celebration for the children, with decorations, treats, and plans to stay up until midnight. Ellie and Max joined in the preparations, helping string paper garlands and set out bowls of snacks. Max was especially excited, his laughter filling the room as he worked alongside his new friends. As evening approached, the children gathered in the main room, their faces filled with excitement and wonder. Ellie watched Max, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for how much he had flourished here. She realized that his innocence and joy had been restored, and for that, she would always be thankful. Mr. Harris led a countdown as midnight approached, his warm voice guiding the children in unison. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year's. The room erupted in cheers, laughter, and hugs. Ellie found herself caught up in the moment, her heart swelling as she embraced Max and some of the other children. It was a feeling she hadn't known she was missing, a shared hope, a fresh start. After the celebration, the children began to drift off to bed, tired but happy. Ellie lingered by the small Christmas tree, now slightly worn but still standing in its corner. The little wooden star they had received as a gift hung proudly at the top, a reminder of the journey that had brought them here. Mr. Harris joined her, his gaze also on the tree. "It's been a wonderful holiday," he said softly. "And it's just the beginning for you and Max. I'm so glad you're both here." Ellie looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Harris, for everything. This place, it's more than we ever could have hoped for." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You both have brought so much joy here. Remember, Ellie, that you and Max are part of this family now. And family means we look out for each other." As he left, Ellie stood alone for a moment, taking in the quiet peace of the room. She felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before, a feeling of home, of family, of a life she had never dared to dream. When she finally returned to her room, Max was already asleep, a peaceful smile on his face. She lay down beside him, feeling the warmth of the blanket and the comfort of knowing they were safe. As she closed her eyes, she felt the excitement of the new year ahead, filled with promise and possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Ellie let herself dream of school, of friendships, of a future filled with hope and joy. The world felt open and inviting, and she knew that no matter what came next, she and Max would face it together. They had found their home, and with it, a new beginning. Hey, everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps us bring you more heartfelt tales like this one. We'd also love to know what part of the story had the most impact on you. Was it Ellie and Max's kindness? The warmth of the community? Let us know in the comments below. And if you have any story ideas or themes you'd like to see on the channel, drop your suggestions too. Your input helps shape the stories we share, and we can't wait to hear what inspires you. Thanks for being part of our story-loving community.